Hey guys, tonight we're heading into a place where the snow is deeper than your boots, the wind sharper than any knife, and the silence so complete that even your own heartbeat feels like it might give you away. We're going into Karelia, that frozen corner between Finland and the Soviet Union. During one of the coldest and most brutal chapters of World War II, the Winter War, and you poor unlucky soul are not a soldier with a cozy bunk and a stove. Nope, you're a sniper, which means your bed is the snow, your blanket is the snow. And yes, you guessed it, your whole life depends on becoming the snow. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far warmer than 30 degrees, let me know your location and local time in the comments. It helps remind us that while you're sitting under a blanket sipping cocoa, others once lay freezing in the Karelia forest, with only frozen sardines for company. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The snow hits you first. Not gently, like the romantic flurries in a Christmas movie, but as a wall of icy powder that claws at your face and fills the cracks in your clothing. Every step you take through the drifts feels like dragging your legs through cement. And yet, this is where you have to live, breathe, and if you're careful enough, fight. The Soviets are out there, larger in number, better supplied and stomping across the landscape like noisy giants. Your weapon? Silence, patience, and the ability to vanish into this pale wilderness. To start, you need a nest. Not the cozy kind with feathers and warmth, but a shallow pit carved into the snow where you'll lay flat for hours, sometimes days. You scoop out just enough to lower your profile, patting down the sides with mittened hands, until the walls harden into icy barricades. If you've done it right, from 10 meters away, you're nothing but another lump in the endless white sheet of Karelia. If you've done it wrong, well, let's just say you won't be doing it again. The Finns had a word for this art of vanishing, sisi taktiika, or guerrilla tactics. In this frozen arena, the snow itself became a weapon. Soviet soldiers often complained that the enemy seemed to materialize out of nowhere, fire a shot, and then melt back into the drifts. It wasn't magic, though it sure looked like it. It was practice, discipline, and an acceptance that your comfort, your body heat, and even your ability to move were luxuries you had to surrender. You press yourself into your new snow cradle. Within minutes, the frost finds you. Your fingertips tingle inside your gloves. Your breath crystallizes into little spikes of frost on the fabric near your face, and your toes start to whisper complaints that will soon escalate into screams. And this is just the beginning. Remember, you can't wiggle around or stamp your feet to stay warm. Motion is death. You have to lie still, perfectly still, while the storm buries you a little deeper with every gust. One mainstream fact that historians agree on is that Finnish snipers became legends during this war, not because they had more firepower, but because they mastered invisibility. They were so adept at blending into the landscape that Soviet reports often described being fired upon by phantoms. And you're learning that invisibility doesn't come free. It comes with frozen lashes, aching muscles, and the nagging awareness that if you fall asleep right here, the snow will happily tuck you in forever. Here's a quirky detail that doesn't make the textbooks. Some snipers claimed that lying still long enough actually attracted curious birds, which would perch on their snow-camouflaged backs, mistaking them for harmless mounds. Imagine being so still that a raven decides you're just part of the scenery. Of course, the downside is if the bird squawks, it might give you away. Talk about a feathery frenemy. And of course, there's debate among historians about just how effective these first snow nests really were. Some argue they offered little more than psychological reassurance, a sense that you were hiding, even if you were still relatively exposed. Others insist they were crucial, shaving vital centimeters off your silhouette and making you invisible to a Soviet soldier scanning the white horizon. The truth, as always, is somewhere buried in the snowdrifts. You adjust your rifle, careful not to let the metal scrape against ice. Even the tiniest noise can betray you. All the while, your heartbeat sounds like a drum in your ears. You're cold, you're stiff, and you're starting to wonder if this pit you dug is your first defense or your final resting place. But out there, just beyond the birch trees crusted with frost, you know the Soviets are moving. And if you can endure long enough, silent enough, you might just get your chance. The pit of snow cradles you like a coffin you've carved for yourself, and that's exactly the point. Out here, invisibility is survival. You lower your chin just enough to feel the frozen air creep into your scarf. And you remind yourself every breath, every twitch, every rustle could be the last mistake you ever make. Now comes the part that nobody ever glamorizes, the ritual of preparation. Before you even think about aiming your rifle or peering through iron sights, you need to make your body match the snow. You pull out a small tin, battered and dented, the lid stiff with frost. Inside is animal fat, lard scraped from pigs slaughtered months ago and kept frozen solid ever since. It smells like old kitchens and barns, but in this war it might as well be perfume. You smear it across your face, your nose, the backs of your hands, any place where the air might bite deepest. It's greasy, unpleasant, and it stings in the cracks of your chapped skin. But without it, frostbite will take you before the Soviets do. This practice wasn't unique to you. Soldiers across history, Arctic explorers, Siberian hunters, had used fat as an extra layer of protection. What makes it quirky here is that in some Finnish units, men swore that reindeer fat worked better than pig fat, and a quiet rivalry formed over which grease produced the best sniper skin. Historians laugh at it now, but out in the field it mattered. You'd try anything to keep your nose from blackening and falling off. You rub it in until your skin glistens like a candle under moonlight. It feels revolting, but at least you can flex your fingers without the sharp sting of ice crystals forming in your knuckles. The rifle rests against your side, and you can feel the cold metal almost humming with danger. You know better than to touch it with bare skin. One slip, one quick adjustment without gloves, and you'll be fused to the steel like a tongue stuck to a frozen pole. That's why you wrap rags around it, old cloth torn from undershirts, sometimes even bits of curtain stolen from abandoned houses. You wind it tight around the barrel, the trigger guard, the bolt handle, anywhere your hand might touch. It looks shabby, like a child trying to dress a toy in winter clothes, but it's the difference between being ready to fire and being stuck to your own weapon. Here's a fact worth remembering. The Finnish Mosin Nagant rifle, the one you're holding, had a bolt that could seize solid in extreme cold if left unprepared. To prevent this, Finnish snipers often refused to use oil. It would freeze and gum up the works. Instead, they stripped the rifle clean and left it bone dry, even if it squeaked when handled. Soviet rifles, on the other hand, sometimes failed in these conditions. This gave you an edge, but only if you treated your weapon with monk-like discipline. You shift your weight slightly, just enough to breathe through a folded towel pressed against your mouth. This, too, is part of the ritual. Without it, each breath would puff out in a little white cloud, a flare for any keen-eyed soldier across the way. But the towel catches it, holds the vapor close, so from a distance you vanish into the whiteness. Try holding your breath for more than a minute, though. You'll pass out long before you spot your target. The towel is the unsung hero. Historians still argue about how universal this technique was. Some claim it was common practice among Finnish snipers. Others insist it was more a trick picked up by individuals than something written into manuals. There's no neat document stamped by generals saying, "Cover your mouth with a towel." What we do know is that Soviet reports sometimes mention no smoke from the mouths of the Finnish, which suggests that at least some of you were mastering the art of invisible breathing. You lie there, the fat greasy on your cheeks, the rags muffling your rifle, the towel damp with your breath. Hours pass like this. Snowflakes build on your back until you're more snowdrift than soldier. And yet the ritual keeps you alive. Without the fat, your face would blister. Without the rags, your fingers would weld to metal. Without the towel, a puff of vapor would betray you. A thought creeps in, one you can't quite shake. Is all this effort really worth it? You've become a creature half human, half snowbank, all for the chance to fire a single bullet. The Soviets outnumber you by the thousands. Does your greasy, towel-covered frozen vigil really matter in the grand scheme of things? Historians still debate the answer. Some argue that Finnish snipers turned the tide by creating chaos, forcing the Soviets to march in fear of ghosts. Others say the snipers were only one small piece of a larger puzzle: terrain, morale, and sheer stubbornness. The truth? It's buried in the same snow you're lying in now. You press deeper into the frost, your body humming with the strange numbness that isn't quite pain anymore. The snow nest is shallow, barely deep enough to cover your outline, but that's all you need. You settle in, pressing your elbows into the crusted surface and feel the cold seep through every seam of your uniform. It's not a slow chill. It's immediate, sharp, like the snow is licking your bones. Your breath grows shallower as your body begins to understand that warmth is no longer on the menu tonight. Out here in Karelia, the winter doesn't politely knock on your door. It barges in and rearranges the furniture. Temperatures can plummet to 30 degrees Celsius, sometimes colder with the wind screaming across the frozen lakes. In that kind of environment, your body becomes your own worst enemy. The blood pulls away from your fingers and toes, retreating to protect the core. You lose sensation in your hands. Your feet feel like bricks, and your mind starts playing cruel tricks. It's not unusual for you to lie here for hours unmoving. At first, every muscle itches to twitch, to flex, to relieve the pins and needles crawling under your skin. You deny yourself the luxury. Slowly, the discomfort grows into pain and then something stranger. Absence. Your legs stop feeling like legs. Your arms fade into weights attached to your shoulders. You become more snow than soldier. And here's where it gets eerie. Some Finnish veterans swore that after long enough they no longer felt cold at all. Their bodies became so numb that their minds convinced them they were warm, sometimes dangerously so. It's a well-documented phenomenon in hypothermia called paradoxical undressing, when victims strip off clothing because they believe they're overheating. Out here, though, you can't risk that. If your brain tries to trick you, you have to grit your teeth and remind yourself it's the snow lying to you. Now, historians still argue whether these extreme waiting games were more psychological than practical. Could one sniper really justify lying in the snow for 6, 8, even 12 hours waiting for the perfect shot? Some believe yes, that patience was the true Finnish weapon. Others argue that most encounters were shorter, the hours-long waits more legend than reality. The truth, as usual, is somewhere in between. Records do exist of extraordinary stillness, but were those the exceptions? The ones that became stories told around campfires later? We'll never know for certain. Meanwhile, your body is staging a quiet rebellion. Your stomach growls, a hollow echo in your chest. You glance down at the lump in your coat pocket, frozen bread. It's hard as stone, unchewable, unless you soften it under your tongue like candy. You ignore it for now. Moving to eat might give you away. Hunger will just have to sit in the back row tonight. A quirky detail floats into your mind. Some snipers would bring a tiny bottle, not for water, but for urination. Because let's face it, when you're lying in the snow for hours, nature will eventually call, so standing up is not an option. Some use bottles. Others dug little channels in the snow beneath them to let the liquid drain away silently. Hardly the stuff of heroic war stories, but hey, survival isn't glamorous. The wind picks up, carrying faint sounds across the frozen expanse. You close your eyes and listen. The forest around you is eerily quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves. Just the distant creak of ice, and if you're lucky, the faint scrape of skis. That sound is everything. Soviet soldiers, with their heavier gear and bulkier boots, often moved less gracefully. The crunch of a step, the snap of a twig. Tiny mistakes in the silence that could betray them. Your job is to be quieter than quiet, stiller than still. Your fingers itch to shift on the rifle stock, but you remind yourself of the towel against your face. The rags wound around the metal, the fat sealing your skin. These preparations weren't for comfort, they were for this moment. Every precaution, every greasy smear, every ragged cloth, they were all rehearsals for the act of becoming invisible. You feel the snow shifting as more flakes fall, layering over your body. It's almost comforting, like the world is tucking you in, but it also makes you think. If you were to die here, motionless in your snow nest, would anyone find you before the thaw? Or would you simply vanish, another white bump in a white field, forgotten until spring revealed your bones? The snow offers both camouflage and a coffin. It doesn't care which. And so you wait, breath shallow, eyes open, muscles locked. Your body fading into the winter, your mind balanced on the thin line between vigilance and madness. Time drips slower than molasses in this cold, but you have no choice except to wait. And waiting out here isn't just about patience, it's about rituals that keep your body from betraying you. That greasy film of animal fat is only step one. Next comes your weapon, your lifeline, and your greatest liability in subzero Karelia. Your rifle. You turn it slightly in your mittened hands, careful not to clink it against the frozen snow around you. A bare fingertip touching the barrel would freeze instantly to the steel. Soldiers who forgot to wrap their rifles sometimes lost skin when they tried to lift them, leaving bloody fingerprints welded to the bolt. You've heard stories of men who panicked and yanked their hands free anyway, only to discover later that the skin stayed behind. Not a good look, so you wrap it. Strips of cloth, scavenged from undershirts, bandages, or even pieces of curtain stolen from abandoned cottages, are wound tight around the barrel and trigger guard. They're stiff with frost, but they make the rifle touchable, manageable. To anyone else it looks shabby, almost ridiculous, a weapon dressed up like a Christmas present. But you know that without it, you couldn't even fire. It's not just the wrapping. Finnish snipers had a peculiar habit of stripping their rifles clean of oil. Why? Because oil in 30 degrees doesn't stay oil. It thickens, freezes, and gums up the bolt so badly, you'd be lucky to fire one shot before the rifle locked shut. Instead, they left the parts bone dry, squeaky even. That squeak might sound risky, but compared to a frozen bolt, it was a small price to pay. Soviet soldiers often discovered this the hard way, when their oiled rifles refused to cycle. For Finns, discipline and dry steel meant their rifles worked when the cold tried to betray them. And here comes the debate. Historians still argue over how effective these methods really were. Did the rag-wrapped rifles and oil-free bolts make a significant difference? Or are these details exaggerated in hindsight, polished into legend by veterans retelling war stories decades later? Some records support the claim, while others suggest that discipline, keeping your rifle inside your coat when moving, cleaning it obsessively, was just as important. The truth? Like most things in history, it's a snow-covered middle ground. But in the moment, lying in your pit with numb fingers, the debate doesn't matter. What matters is that your rifle cycles smoothly. You test it slowly, carefully, working the bolt back just a centimeter, then easing it forward. No resistance, no sticky grind. A sigh of relief steams faintly against the damp towel covering your mouth. That towel, another ridiculous-looking but life-saving trick, is damp now, heavy against your lips. But it does its job. Without it, each breath would rise in a tiny puff of vapor, a giveaway sign against the endless white. The Soviets aren't blind. They scan for the smallest movement, the faintest shimmer of breath. With the towel, your exhale seeps sideways, merging with the snowdrift. You're hidden not just in body, but in breath. You've been still so long that your mind starts wandering to odd, almost comical places. Imagine explaining this setup to someone back home. Well, I cover my face in bacon grease, wrap my rifle in curtains, and breathe into a damp rag for 10 hours. It sounds more like a bizarre spa treatment than a battle plan. The absurdity of it all almost makes you laugh, almost. But laughter here would come out as a white cloud. And clouds mean death. Another quirky detail drifts into memory. Some Finns claimed they rubbed a bit of snow along the barrel before firing, just to cool it and prevent steam rising from hot steel. Whether that really helped or not, it added one more layer to the ritual of disappearing into the winter. A rifle, after all, isn't just a weapon here. It's part of the snow, part of you, part of the disguise. The Soviets, for all their numbers and machinery, never quite cracked this mystery. They saw white-clad figures vanish, shots ring out, and then nothing. No movement, no trail. Some reported finding rifles later, abandoned in snow pits, still wrapped in ragged cloth. Each one a ghost story in metal form. And as you press your cheek against the stock now, you can't help but feel a strange pride. You're not armed with tanks, not with artillery. You're armed with grease, cloth, a towel, and patience. Against overwhelming odds, these tiny, ridiculous, life-saving hacks are what make you dangerous. So you wait, the rifle nestled in its rags, the bolt ready, the towel heavy with your hidden breath. The storm rages on, but you're steady, motionless, invisible. You press the damp cloth to your mouth and nose like a guilty secret, and it feels oddly intimate. 2 pieces of fabric and a single mission. In a landscape where even your exhale can be a flare, learning to manage breath is its own craft. The towel traps your vapor so that it doesn't plume into the air and betray your position. It muffles the tiny white ghost that would otherwise float and wink at anyone scanning the horizon. You breathe slow, shallow, and polite, as if trying not to interrupt a sleeping house. Breathing through fabric turns into a kind of breathing choreography. You practice tiny inhales, short pauses, longer exhales swallowed by the towel's damp fibers. The fabric warms and collects frost, and after a while every puff leaves a pinprick of ice on the surface. You have to shift the cloth occasionally, without moving your head, to keep an opening from icing shut. That movement is a micro-gesture, practiced until it's as automatic as tying your bootlace. There's a straightforward wartime fact behind this ritual. Visible breath at sub-zero temperatures is easily seen against white snow at distance. Observers with binoculars or even naked eyes could spot a faint cloud and triangulate its source. Finnish snipers and scouts developed a whole set of breathing techniques to minimize that sign. They weren't trying to be mystical. They were trying to be invisible, a quirky detail. Some men preferred wool handkerchiefs, others cotton, and a few swore that damp birch bark, yes, birch bark, worked better because it didn't freeze as quickly and yielded a different pattern of condensation. Imagine arguing over birch bark like it's a sommelier's note. No, this bark gives a rounder exhale, more discreet on a windy day. Survival makes for strange preferences. The trick, though, is balance. If you clamp the towel to your mouth and hold breath too long, you become woozy. If you breathe too deeply, you fog up the fabric and create a little white moon that says, "Hey, look here." You teach your lungs to be economical. In training, veterans told young recruits to pant like a patient after a long stair climb. Short, steady breaths, never deep bellows. It sounds undignified, panting instead of heroic inhalations, but dignity is a casualty of camouflage. There's also a technical angle. The towel acts as a condenser. When warm, moist breath hits cold fabric, the water vapor becomes tiny droplets that cling to the fibers instead of drifting away. The condensation remains localized and quiet. Think of the towel as a tiny, discrete sink for your breath. But fiber choice matters. Synthetic materials, if you had them, would behave differently from natural fibers. And in 1939 to 40, Finland, the choices were limited to what the pocket and scavenging offered. Historians still argue about how universal the towel method was. Some reports and memoirs describe it as standard practice among elite marksmen. Other sources suggest it was a field improvisation, used by clever individuals rather than a doctrine taught from the top. Official manuals rarely include such intimate tips. Manuals prefer to discuss range tables and ballistics, not the semiotics of exhalation. So much of what we know comes from veterans' recollections, oral history, and anecdote. The uncertainty is telling. Practical hacks often live in human memory rather than paper doctrine. Some snipers exhaled through the side of the mouth to weaken plumes. Others pressed the cloth over just the upper lip and nostrils. A few constructed tiny sleeves of cloth attached to scarves that could be repositioned with a fingertip. One veteran later joked that they invented a primitive face mask long before such fashions came back around. Only its purpose was stealth, not politics. Practical problems arise too. A soaked towel freezes into a stony crust. Then it becomes worse than useless. Ice chips can flake off and the rigid scrap can cut your face if you're careless. You learn to keep a spare tucked inside your coat, where body heat prevents it from icing solid. Remember that frozen sardine tin in your pocket. You might use its lid to scrape frost and revive a crumpled cloth, or to shave off icicles from a frozen breath trap. That little tin has more lives than a cat. Breath control also has psychological consequences. Breathing shallow can feel like holding your life in a fist. It triggers claustrophobia in some men. You start whispering songs into the towel to keep your heart steady. A private lullaby that won't reach enemy ears. These rituals, songs, jokes, tiny hand signals, become scaffolding that keeps your mind from fraying under stillness, and humor survives in small ways. You think, if I'm invisible enough, maybe I can finally get a nap without being judged. Or a veteran's quip, "This towel makes me look like a very low-budget ghost." Cracking a tiny smile, even internally, relieves tension. Just don't breathe hard enough to fog your grin. The broader debate among historians also touches on performance versus necessity. Did Finnish snipers breathe into towels because they had to, or because it became a cultural marker of toughness and craft? Some scholars suggest rituals like fat rags towels were performative, a way to assert identity in a brutal environment. Others emphasize pure function. Likely both are true. Practical hacks become badges of belonging. You adjust the towel once more, feeling the damp cold at its fibers, and settle back into your nest. Each breath is a negotiation. Enough oxygen to keep your eyes open, quiet enough to keep your shape hidden. The forest breathes around you. Your breath, contained and secret, becomes part of the hush. Outside, the Soviets move like large, impatient predators. Inside, you are patient, made of cloth and cold and persistence. You breathe. The towel catches it. You are still. For the moment, you are invisible. Time here stretches like taffy, slow and sticky, and you learn that hours can fold into each other until you can't tell afternoon from a new moon. You lie there, a pale hummock in the birch forest, and the world reduces to a few small things. The soft rasp of fabric against skin, the distant creak of ice, the rhythm of your own breathing trapped in the towel. Waiting is the real weapon. The shot at the end is merely punctuation. Your watch, if it still works, becomes a talisman. Some men removed the glass to prevent it shattering in the cold. Others wound theirs so mildly that the ticking was a heartbeat against loneliness. Officially, Finnish units rotated men so that no one froze in place, forever. Sniper pairs and small teams swapped observation and rest, but in practice rotations could be hours apart because movement itself was dangerous. The fact is clear. Finnish guerrilla tactics relied on small unit flexibility and endurance to make up for the gap in numbers and material. Stillness brings peculiar sensations. At first your legs scream, then they go numb. Then they stop announcing their presence at all. Numbness is strange company. You begin to lose perspective of limb versus landscape. Your legs feel like dead branches. Your arms are ledger lines on a frozen score. Sometimes you test them very slightly, an ankle twitch, a finger flex, to reassure yourself you still exist. Those micro movements are like tiny confessions. You try to keep them private. The mind does odd things in long waits. You rehearse conversations with people you love, reciting entire scripts in whisper thoughts so loud they feel almost audible. You catalogue trees, birch, pine, a knotty spruce that looks like a face. You imagine the snow as layers of history, each flake a small fossil of an untold story. That tendency to narrate is a defense. It keeps your brain from dissolving into panic. One veteran later wrote that the only reason he didn't go mad was by composing limericks about birch trees and selling snow as artisanal bedding to imaginary tourists. Humor keeps the edges soft. Quirky. Survival hacks proliferate in these quiet hours. Some men tucked a smidgen of spruce resin under their tongues to warm the throat and stave off the coughing that betrays breath. Others stuffed a handful of dry moss beneath a hat as a primitive insulator. Odd rituals build into customs. The small thing you do tonight becomes the story you tell later, the badge of your personal sisu. Finnish stubbornness and endurance. It's both practical and cultural. Sisu is less a medical technique than an attitude that glues you to your post when every sensible muscle begs retreat. Historians contend with how much of sniper lore is myth and how much changed real outcomes. There are solid facts. Finnish tactics inflicted disproportionate casualties and slowed Soviet advances during the Winter War. And small mobile units leveraged local knowledge and endurance to punch well above their weight. But scholars still argue about the scale. Were snipers decisive in tactical victories, Or were they one cog among many? Weather, terrain, logistics, command failures. The open debate keeps the story lively. Truth tends to sit between the bold claims and the cautious footnotes. Time compresses until you measure it in breaths. You count silently, 1, 2, 3, repeat. Counting is a trick to steady yourself. You invent games. How many birch trunks between you and the ridge? If a raven flies across the clearing, bet a frozen sardine which tree it will land on. These trivial contests sharpen attention. Ironically, the brain that wants to wander needs structure, and counting supplies it. There are also the ignoble bodily logistics. You try not to drink much to avoid needing to urinate, since standing to pee is a risk. You bottle discreetly when you must, tucking the container under snow and covering it, so no glint betrays you. Hunger gnaws, and when at last you chew frozen bread, it tastes like victory. Humor threads through the dread. You joke to yourself that someday you'll write a cookbook titled Freeze-Dried Delights, A Sniper's Guide. The laughter is a small, private rebellion, and you even joke you'll open a bistro called Freeze-Dried Delights, featuring frozen bread. No reservations necessary. As twilight settles, shapes deepen and edges soften. The forest becomes less three-dimensional, more suggestion than structure. Depth perception falters. A ridge can vanish, a stump reads as a man. That's a danger. Your training teaches you to verify with your eyes only when necessary, to use peripheral cues. Sound, the pattern of snowfall, the direction of wind. You whisper the rules to yourself like a litany. Never sit up unless you must. Always check the wind. Keep the rifle close. Keep the towel damp. Eventually you learn that waiting is not empty time. It is full of observation, ritual, small inventions, and the steady cultivation of a sliver of calm. When the moment comes, if it comes, it will feel both sudden and inevitable. You will have earned it hour by careful hour, breath by measured breath. For now you lie with the forest breathing around you and inside you, the snow stitching you into the landscape, until man and ground are nearly indistinguishable. And if nothing happens, that's acceptable too. Survival sometimes means returning to camp with frostbitten fingers and an empty rifle. You will be scorned by the superstitious as a jinx, praised by veterans as patient. The war is capricious, and patience is a skill that pays off differently each day. Still you lie there, committed to the slow arithmetic of watchfulness, a small, stubborn artifact of quiet endurance. The snow doesn't move, but your mind does. It wanders, drifting through the hours of stillness until it lands on a figure every Finnish soldier knows by name, even if they've never met him. His name is Simo Heiha. To his comrades he was just Simo, a short farmer with a quiet smile. To the Soviets he became the White Death, a shadow in the snow with a rifle and endless patience. You lie here, frozen into your pit, and you can almost feel his presence at your side. He is the story everyone tells, whispered by fires, repeated in dugouts, passed along in letters. Some call him a ghost, others a hunter touched by fate. And whether you believe the numbers or not, you can't deny the effect of his legend. They say he killed more than 500 Soviets in just 100 days. That's 5 men a day, an impossible number. Unless you remember the scale of this war, the endless columns of troops, the frozen bottlenecks where men became easy targets. Heiha didn't stand out physically. He was barely 5'3", quiet, reserved, a farmer who tended his land and loved skiing before the war pulled him into uniform. And yet, when he lay down in the snow, he became invisible in a way few others could match. It wasn't just about skill with a rifle, it was the whole ritual. The discipline to stay still, the cunning to blend with terrain, the stubbornness to ignore hunger and frost until he had the shot. One of the most repeated details about Heha is his choice to avoid scopes. Most snipers would have used telescopic sights to magnify their targets. Heha refused. He stuck to iron sights, claiming they gave him 3 advantages: a lower profile, no risk of scope glare betraying his position, and immunity from frost fogging the lens. With iron sights, he could keep his head low and invisible, his eye close to the rifle without risking frostbite from metal. The decision sounds humble, but it became part of the myth. The ghost who didn't need magnification to see you. And then there's the strangest part of his story: snow in the mouth. Some veterans claim he stuffed a scoop of snow between his lips to hide his breath. If true, it meant that even the faint plume of vapor that rose from a man's lips in 30°C air would vanish. No white ghost hovering in front of his face, no betraying cloud in the morning light. Whether he did this regularly or only on occasion is debated to this day. Historians argue, was it a consistent tactic or just a story repeated until it hardened into legend? But lying here in your pit, towel damp against your mouth, the idea seems perfectly believable. You'd try anything to stay unseen. The Soviets certainly believed it. They believed in him enough to fear every silent field, every motionless snowdrift. Accounts describe men hesitating to cross clearings, muttering that the White Death might be watching. When a single man becomes more terrifying than an entire platoon, you know a legend has done its work. The truth is stranger still. Hehe was not superhuman. He was methodical. He practiced relentlessly. He knew the land better than the invaders. He kept his rifle immaculately clean, free of oil that could freeze. He wore plain white, moved on skis with the ease of a hunter, and used every trick the Finns knew: fat on his skin, rags on his weapon, patience until his body was almost stone. His kills weren't just the work of luck or talent. They were the result of preparation stacked upon preparation, tiny rituals done over and over until invisibility was second nature. Of course, historians debate the numbers. Were there really 500 confirmed kills? Some records suggest less. Others hint it could have been more. The fog of war doesn't leave neat tallies, especially in the chaos of Karelia's forests. Diaries and after-action reports give conflicting accounts. Some argue that the high numbers were propaganda, meant to inspire Finns and terrify Soviets. Others insist that his reputation was entirely earned, that he was simply that skilled. The truth is lost in the snowdrifts, but the impact remains. Whether 500 or 200, the effect on morale was immense, and the man himself, he never bragged. When asked about his kills after the war, Heha simply said, "I did what I was told, as well as I could." That humility, contrasted with the enormity of his reputation, only deepened the legend. You can't help but smile beneath your towel, imagining him lying here with you, cheeks numb, stomach empty, rifle pressed against rags. Maybe he complained about the same frozen bread. Maybe he cursed the same frostbite creeping into his toes. Maybe, like you, he distracted himself with little jokes whispered into the snow. The difference is that his patience, repeated thousands of times, became history. There's humor in the fear he inspired, too. Soviet soldiers, trudging through the forest, muttering about invisible hunters. Imagine being told by your commander, "Somewhere out there is a farmer who will kill you without warning, and you will never see him." The paranoia alone could make every shadow into a phantom. Some joked grimly that in Finland even the trees had rifles, and so you lie there, Your body aching, your breath damp in cloth. And you understand why stories like Heha's survive. Legends aren't just about numbers, they're about comfort. For you freezing in silence, the myth tells you that endurance is possible. For your enemy, the myth tells them the snow itself might shoot at them. The same name, two different powers. You press deeper into your snow nest and wait. Maybe someday someone will whisper about you too, though you doubt it. Most men vanish into snow without becoming stories. But tonight, with the White Death's legend keeping you company, you feel a little less alone. The forest is white on white, snow piled on branches, snow crusted into drifts, snow so endless that you start to wonder if the world ever had color at all. In this pale void, camouflage is less about blending in and more about becoming invisible altogether. That's the next part of your vigil. Snow camouflage. You smooth your coat down against your body, pulling the makeshift white cover tighter. It isn't a sleek uniform tailored for invisibility. Sometimes it's just a repurposed bedsheet. Sometimes an overcoat hastily dyed with chalk, lime, or even flour, rubbed into the fabric. Finnish soldiers learned quickly that anything too dark or too patterned popped against Karelia's fields. The best disguise wasn't elegant. It was practical, even laughably simple. Here's a mainstream fact. Many Finnish units had standard-issue white camouflage suits, essentially oversized smocks worn over normal uniforms. They were lightweight, easy to strip off, and crucial for turning an ordinary soldier into part of the snow. In contrast, Soviet soldiers often lacked such gear early in the war, making them dark figures trudging across a white page. That difference alone tilted the odds toward the smaller Finnish force. But there's debate. Historians still argue over how universally those white smocks were issued and used. Some records insist they were plentiful. Others suggest shortages meant that many snipers relied on improvisation. There are photographs of Finns wearing full snowsuits, and there are also memoirs describing men tearing up sheets in abandoned villages to make their own. The argument lingers. How much was official supply and how much was Finnish ingenuity under pressure? The quirks are what stick in memory. One veteran recalled rubbing charcoal across the edges of his white clothing to break up the silhouette against shadowed snow. Another claimed that some men sprinkled snow directly onto their shoulders and helmets before lying down, refreshing the dusting every hour like gardeners tending plants. And yes, there were jokes too. One soldier swore he scared a comrade by rising up suddenly from a drift, who promptly mistook him for a snow spirit. War makes comedians of the cold. You glance down at yourself, stretched long and flat in the nest. Your rifle, wrapped in cloth, lies against your shoulder, its barrel dusted with powder. You've stuffed handfuls of snow around your chest and legs, patting them until they stick, so you resemble nothing more than another frozen mound. From a distance, if you remain still, you're indistinguishable from the terrain. Only your eyes, faint slivers behind frosted lashes, betray life. There's a deeper psychological truth here. Camouflage isn't just about hiding from the enemy. It's about convincing yourself that you've disappeared. The more snow you pile, the more you cover yourself, the more you start to believe you're untouchable. That confidence steadies your nerves, slows your breath, keeps your hands from trembling on the stock. A soldier who believes he's unseen is a soldier who can wait as long as it takes. Still, doubts creep in. The snow shifts. Shadows lengthen. You wonder if some Soviet sharpshooter is playing the same game, staring at a lump that looks suspiciously alive. The duel of invisibility runs both ways. Every mound could be a rifle. Every drift could be waiting. The snow hides you, but it hides them too. Your body aches and you think of the absurdity. All this trouble to look like snow when you could just lie in snow. But the uniform matters. Without it, your dark wool coat would broadcast your position like a signal lamp. With it, you're an outline erased. And it's not just about you. In a forest where dozens of men wear white, the landscape becomes populated with phantoms. The Soviets can never be sure how many eyes watch from the trees. Humor creeps in again because what else can you do? You imagine a laundry line strung across the battlefield with all these white smocks drying and a Soviet scout scratching his head. Is this a camp or just a very dedicated laundry day? Camouflage at its core is absurd, pretending to be something you're not, hoping the deception lasts. But absurdity saves lives. You pull the hood tighter, adjust the snow across your chest and let yourself sink further into whiteness. You are snow, you tell yourself. Snow does not breathe. Snow does not move. Snow waits. Silence in Karelia is not empty. It's a thick, breathing presence. A thing that presses down on your ears until even the faintest sound feels magnified. Lying in your snow nest, you become attuned to this silence. At first it unsettles you, like a room too quiet where you know someone is hiding. But slowly you start to hear within it. The forest has its own language, and if you're patient enough, you learn to listen. The first thing you notice is your own body. Your pulse echoes in your ears louder than it should be. Your breath, muffled behind the towel, hisses like a leaky valve. The fabric of your uniform groans faintly if you shift even a fraction. All of this feels deafening at first, until you discipline yourself to tune it out, to breathe softer, to hold still. Then the forest opens up. There's a mainstream fact. Finnish snipers often relied on sound more than sight. The snow could blur shapes. Shadows could trick the eyes, but the ear rarely lied. The crunch of a ski across crusted snow, the faint thump of boots in a drift, the snapping of a frozen twig, all became signals. A well-trained ear could pinpoint distance and direction far faster than a pair of cold-watering eyes staring through iron sights. And in that silence, you start to hear the oddest details. Snow settling after wind has stopped makes a sighing sound as if the whole forest exhales. Ice shifting on a lake miles away sends a groaning moan that rolls through the trees. Even a raven flapping overhead produces a leathery crackle in the air. Each sound is information, telling you what is alive, what is moving, and what is merely winter shifting its weight. There are quirky stories that Finnish veterans tell. One recalled learning to distinguish between a rabbit nibbling bark and a soldier's boot scraping wood. Another joked that after the war, he could still tell the difference between a spruce creaking in frost and a man leaning against one. A skill born in the snow, carried into civilian life like an unwanted souvenir. You lie still and listen. Far off, there's a faint swish-swish like someone dragging a broom. That's skis. Soviet troops often used them, but they moved clumsily compared to Finns. The sound carries easily in frozen air. You hold your breath, straining your ears. A second swish follows, then another. They're close. Without the silence, you wouldn't know. With it, you know they're within range long before your eyes confirm it. Historians debate just how effective this auditory vigilance was. Some argue that Finnish reliance on sound was overstated, more a romanticized detail than a decisive factor. Others maintain it was vital, especially in poor visibility, where snow and twilight blurred everything. The truth, as usual, lies somewhere between, but out here listening feels like the only tool left to you. You start cataloging noises like a librarian of winter. A branch snaps, sharp, deliberate, not wind. A metallic clink, too alien for the forest. Rifle sling buckle, maybe. Then the odd silence again, thicker than before. Soldiers sometimes pause, listening for you while you listen for them. It becomes a contest of patience, two hunters trying to hear the heartbeat of the other through a wall of snow. Humor worms its way into even this tension. You think, if I ever get home, I'll be able to tell when my neighbor sneaks out at night just by the creak of his porch step. You imagine advertising your new skill. Professional silence listener available for hire. Can detect mice, burglars, or disappointed in-laws. A smile tugs at you, but you keep it inside. Smiles make breath, and breath makes clouds. Sound becomes not just survival, but a way to stay sane. You count them, compare them, turn them into little games. How many crows today? How many boot crunches? You give the noises personalities. Creaks that sound like grumpy old men. Snaps that sound like impatient sergeants. In silence, imagination is both curse and comfort. And so you lie, not blind, not deaf, but somewhere in between, an ear pressed to the winter, listening to its secrets. The snow nest is not only camouflage, it's an amplifier making you part of the frozen soundscape. Invisibility, you realize, isn't just about what the eye can't see. It's also about what the ear can't confirm. Snow is a paradoxical companion. It hides you, shapes you, protects you, but it also gnaws at your body like a patient predator. Lying in your shallow nest, you realize that snow is both ally and enemy. It covers your outline, muffles your rifle, and swallows the crack of a shot. But it also creeps into your boots, freezes your joints, and threatens to make you part of itself forever. On the friendly side, snow gives you cover so complete that it feels like magic. With your white smock pulled tight and your body half buried, even trained eyes pass over you. The Soviets, trudging in their darker coats, stand out like ink blots on paper, while you are the page itself. You even pack snow carefully around your rifle barrel, so the muzzle flash is muted, smoke disappearing in the white swirl. Without snow, invisibility would be nearly impossible. There's a mainstream fact here. Finnish guerrilla units used the terrain masterfully. Snow wasn't just camouflage, it was transportation. Men on skis glided across it silently, carrying rifles and supplies where Soviet trucks sank. Entire squads melted into the drifts, striking suddenly and then vanishing. In memoirs, Soviet soldiers complained of fighting shadows on skis. The snow made those shadows possible. But then comes the cruelty. Snow is cold in ways that language fails to capture. It doesn't just sit against your skin, it infiltrates. It worms down collars, sneaks into seams, fills boots until toes ache like shattered glass. You can lie still for hours, and when you try to move again, your muscles refuse. Numbness becomes something worse, forgetfulness. You forget what warm feels like. A quirky detail. Some Finnish soldiers stuffed their socks with hay, scavenged from barns or even thatched roofs. It wasn't comfortable, and it certainly wasn't fashionable, but it created a buffer against frost. Others rubbed their boots with tar or animal grease to try to waterproof the leather, though the smell meant comrades could sometimes track each other by scent alone. "Follow the boot grease," one man joked, "and you'll never be lost." Historians still argue about whether snow's protective qualities outweighed its dangers. Some emphasize that camouflage and concealment gave Finland a decisive edge. Others point out that frostbite casualties sometimes rivaled combat losses. Was snow the greatest ally of the Finns, or their harshest enemy? The debate continues, but lying here, stiff and aching, you know the answer feels like both. Your rifle rests steady, its rags frosted stiff. You flex your toes gently inside their hay-stuffed prison, testing if you can still feel them. A faint prickling. Good. Pain means life. You shift your fingers slightly, but even that tiny motion makes the snow crackle, loud in the silence. You still, and then humor sneaks in, as it always does in waiting. You think, snow is like a terrible roommate. It covers your stuff, makes you miserable, and still expects you to thank it for being there. You imagine telling the snow to pay rent if it wants to hog the whole forest. The absurdity warms you for a moment, even as frost nips at your cheeks. The snow remains patient and impartial. It doesn't care if you're Finnish or Soviet. It swallows both alike. But tonight in your nest you make it work for you. You are wrapped in its disguise, buried in its silence, and dependent on its mercy. For now, snow is your shield. Tomorrow it might be your grave. Your belly growls again, louder this time, and you realize that the cold is not the only enemy out here. Hunger is just as sharp, and in some ways crueler. A bullet might be quick, but hunger lingers, teasing you with memories of warmth and kitchens, while all you have is a pocket full of frozen bread. You shift your gloved hand carefully, pulling a stiff lump from your coat. It looks more like a piece of firewood than food. Rye bread frozen hard as stone. You try to bite it, but your teeth protest. The only way to eat it is to tuck it under your tongue. Let the warmth of your mouth soften it until you can gnaw a corner. This is dinner and breakfast and sometimes lunch too. Here's the mainstream fact. Rations during the Winter War were notoriously scarce. Finnish supply lines were strained from the start, and with Soviet artillery hammering villages and depots, the army had to make do with whatever could be dragged on skis or hauled in sleds. Soldiers often survived on rye bread, dried fish, hard biscuits, and occasionally thin soup when they rotated back to camp. Out here in the front line, you learn to stretch one sardine tin over days. The quirks of survival foods would be laughable if they weren't so grim. Sardines froze solid in their cans, forcing you to warm them inside your coat until they were soft enough to pry open. Some men carried their tins in their armpits, a ridiculous but effective tactic that turned body heat into a kitchen. Frozen butter shattered like glass if you struck it with a knife, so soldiers shaved flakes off and ate them like brittle candy. Chocolate, when it could be found, was treasured like gold. Some men held squares on their tongues, letting them melt slowly, savoring each second as if it were a holiday feast. Historians still argue about how bad the food shortages really were. Some claim that Finnish logistics, though strained, kept men alive better than expected, pointing to the ingenuity of ski troops carrying supplies through forests. Others insist that frontline diaries prove just how desperate things became, with men sometimes running on less than 1,000 calories a day. The truth, as always, is uneven. Some units fared better, others starved. You think back to comrades who turned hunger into humor. One soldier used to rattle an empty sardine tin and announce, "Soup's on." Another joked that hard biscuits were secretly bullets because they could chip a tooth if you weren't careful. Men even made competitions of gnawing frozen bread, betting who could crack a piece first. These small games distracted from the emptiness gnawing inside, and hunger changed your senses. A scrap of dried fish, salty and pungent, became a delicacy. A smear of butter on bread tasted like heaven. Even potatoes, boiled and eaten cold, seemed like a feast when compared to sucking on snow for moisture. You never thought you'd crave such simple food so deeply, but war teaches you the value of what you once ignored. You take another bite of bread, letting it soften slowly, and remember something else. Food wasn't just fuel. It was morale. A hot drink, a rare stew, even just a slightly fresher piece of bread could lift spirits in a way no speech from an officer ever could. The army could issue orders, but only food could convince men to keep lying in the snow day after day. And when food failed, men improvised. You recall a comrade who claimed he ate pine bark, scraping the inner layer to chew like tough gum. Others boiled spruce needles for tea, swearing it gave them strength. These sound like myths, but some historians back them up with accounts of soldiers turning to the forest itself for sustenance. It wasn't delicious, but it kept starvation at bay. The absurdity of it hits you as you chew. Here you are, dressed like a snowbank, whispering your breath into a towel, eating bread that could double as a hammer. It's so bleak that it almost becomes funny. You imagine opening a restaurant someday called the Sniper's Kitchen. The menu: frozen bread a la rifle butt, pocket sardine surprise, and chocolate square, limit 1 per customer. For drinks, nothing but melted snow. The customers would laugh and you'd laugh with them, but only because they'd never know the desperation behind the joke. Your stomach growls again, unsatisfied, and you tuck the bread back into your coat. Eating too quickly is dangerous, not just because you need to ration, but because movement itself risks noise. The crack of a tin lid, the rustle of cloth, tiny sounds that could betray you to ears as sharp as your own. Hunger must wait, just as everything else does. Historians sometimes overlook hunger when they tell the story of this war, focusing instead on tanks and battles. But lying here, you know hunger was as much a weapon as any rifle. It slowed movements, clouded thoughts, and tested patience. It forced men to make choices between sharing a sardine or saving it for tomorrow, between chewing bark or enduring the ache. Hunger was the battlefield inside your own belly. And yet even in hunger, humor persisted. You remember a man who said he'd marry the first woman who brought him a hot bowl of stew. Another declared that if he survived, he'd build a statue not of generals but of bread. A third claimed that after weeks of frozen fish, he'd never touch the stuff again in peacetime. Though, of course, after the war, he went right back to eating it. Memory softens pain, but in the moment it was sharp. You lick crumbs from your glove, careful not to waste a speck, and return to stillness. Your stomach complains, but you hush it with discipline. Out here, hunger is just another voice in the forest, and if you let it control you, it's as dangerous as the Soviets. You've learned to treat it like an unruly comrade. Grumble back at it, mock it, but never give it full power. So you lie in your nest, body aching, belly empty, waiting. Food will come again in some form someday. For now, survival is not about feasts. It's about chewing frozen bread in silence and finding humor in sardines. It's about knowing that every man out here is as hungry as you. The snow swallows bullets, the silence swallows voices, and hunger swallows pride. But you endure it because endurance is all you have. Night doesn't fall in Karelia. It seeps thick and deliberate until the last gray smudge of daylight is swallowed. You feel it more than see it. The cold grows sharper, the forest quieter, and your pit of snow heavier, as though darkness itself is pressing on your chest. You lift your head the tiniest fraction, enough to catch a glimpse of the sky, and suddenly the world isn't just white and black anymore. Green light curls above the tree line. At first it's faint, a pale ribbon, but then it unfurls across the heavens, spilling like paint across canvas. The aurora borealis, northern lights, has come to dance above the battlefield. It's so strange that for a moment you forget the rifle against your arm, the towel damp on your mouth. You just watch. The sky ripples like curtains stirred by invisible hands, green blending to violet, then fading, then swelling again. It is silent, eerily so. If you could hear it, if the lights made sound, they would surely roar. But they don't. They move in absolute hush, as if respecting the silence that rules the snow. Here's the mainstream fact. Auroras were common in northern Finland during the Winter War. Soldiers in diaries and letters described them vividly, sometimes in awe, sometimes in annoyance. The light could be beautiful, but it could also cast eerie shadows across the fields, outlining men who wanted nothing more than to remain unseen. For snipers like you, the aurora was double-edged, a spectacle that both distracted and exposed. You squint at the glow, half entranced, half uneasy. If it's lighting your snow pit this clearly, surely it's painting the Soviets too. You imagine them across the forest, staring up at the same sky, muttering curses or prayers. Maybe for once they aren't thinking of phantoms in white. Maybe they're just homesick men staring at something so beautiful it hurts. Then again, soldiers are never content to leave mystery alone. Quirky explanations always spring up in the ranks. Some Finns joked the lights were God's searchlights hunting Soviets. Others swore they were drunken Russian souls staggering home. The Soviets, in turn, sometimes claimed the lights were omens of Finnish witchcraft, proof that the land itself was bewitched against them. War always twists folklore into fuel, and the aurora became one more story in the long list of strange companions to fear. Historians still debate whether auroras had any measurable effect on combat. Some argue the glow was bright enough to ruin concealment, forcing soldiers to hunker down until it faded. Others suggest the light was more psychological than practical, a distraction that broke men's concentration. Diaries support both claims. One man wrote of the aurora making him feel seen by the entire world, while another said it comforted him, a reminder that beauty existed even in the middle of horror. The truth, as usual, is both. The aurora was a hazard and a balm. You lie back into your nest, staring upward, and let the absurdity of it wash over you. Here you are, lying in snow with grease on your cheeks and hay in your boots, staring at a cosmic light show as if it were performed just for you. The contrast is laughable. You imagine advertising the scene. Come to Karelia. Watch the stunning northern lights while freezing half to death and chewing on frozen sardines. 5 stars on TripAdvisor. The humor warms you for a moment, and maybe that's the aurora's real gift. Not the light, but the chance to laugh, to feel small in a way that isn't crushing. If the Soviets are staring up too, then for a moment both sides are simply humans under the same sky. Guns are still loaded, but the universe reminds you that it doesn't revolve around your war. Your breath fogs inside the towel, damp and heavy now. You imagine what Heiha must have thought, lying beneath the same ribbons of light. Did he see them as camouflage, masking his movements with shifting glow, or did he simply ignore them, too focused on the iron sights? The debate doesn't matter, but the thought ties you to history. The aurora shifts again, rippling faster, green and purple streaking like brush strokes across black velvet. It's mesmerizing, so much so that you forget the cold for a heartbeat. You let your eyes follow the curves, tracing their arc until the world seems upside down. The snow is not beneath you but above you. The sky not sky but sea. You're floating, weightless, part of something vast. Then the ache in your toes drags you back. The snow nest is still there and the war is still real. The aurora doesn't care whether you freeze or fight. It is eternal, indifferent, yet that indifference comforts you. And nature isn't cruel, it simply is. Cruelty belongs to men. A comrade once joked that auroras were Finland's best propaganda. Let the Soviets look up and think the sky itself has sided with us, he said. You smile at the memory and wonder if he was right. If fear is half the battle, then maybe beauty can be a weapon too. Still, you can't shake the unease. Shadows stretch differently under aurora light. Snowdrifts look alive, as if something is crawling beneath them. A tree stump appears to shift. Paranoia prickles your neck. Is it beauty or is it a trick? You don't know. You breathe slower, steadying yourself. Out here, even the stars feel like spies, and yet despite the unease, you know you'll remember this moment forever, long after the rifles are silent, long after the snow has melted. The aurora will remain in your memory, not as a threat, but as proof that even in war, beauty refuses to vanish. You settle back, rifle snug against your chest, and let the glow fade slowly, as if curtains are closing on the day. Your body aches, your stomach grumbles, your fingers sting, but your mind feels strangely calm. The aurora has carried you out of the battlefield for a few precious minutes, and that escape is as important as any ration or trick. The snow nest holds you, the silence wraps around you, and the sky above whispers that the world is larger than war. That knowledge doesn't make you safe, but it makes you human again. And for a sniper buried in Karelia, that is its own kind of victory. Your eyes drift away from the aurora, back to the pale ground pressing against your cheek. The stars may offer beauty, but the real battlefield is inside your own head. Hours of lying still in the snow doesn't just test your muscles. It toys with your mind, twisting every thought until you can't tell what's real and what's just the cold whispering lies. At first, the silence feels peaceful, even meditative. But as time drags, stillness becomes a mirror reflecting every fear. Your brain starts filling the void with chatter, with ghosts of voices, with scraps of songs you didn't even know you remembered. One veteran later joked that he recited the same advertising jingle for soap 100 times in one night. Not because he liked it, but because his mind wouldn't let go. You find yourself doing the same, humming tunes, whispering poems, anything to keep your thoughts from spiraling into panic. That's the psychological trap of the sniper's work. Out here, your worst enemy isn't always the Soviet crawling through the trees. It's boredom sharpening into dread, the sheer weight of nothing happening. The longer you wait, the louder your own thoughts become. Your mind tells you to scratch, to twitch, to move just a little. But you can't. You know that the smallest slip might end you. Here's a mainstream fact. Many accounts from the Winter War describe Finnish snipers and scouts using mental tricks to endure the endless stillness. They counted breaths. They recited prayers. They rehearsed plans for what they'd do back home. Plant crops, build barns, marry their sweethearts. Anything to trick the mind into staying calm. This wasn't written in manuals. It was survival psychology, improvised like every other ritual of the snow. The quirky side of it was how creative men became. Some whispered imaginary conversations with their rifles, naming them like pets. Others constructed elaborate fantasies, winning ski races, running taverns, even training bears to help haul supplies. A soldier once confessed that he composed entire jokes about sausages while waiting for a target, then laughed silently into his scarf. It sounds absurd, but absurdity was medicine when the cold tried to hollow you out. And historians still argue about just how much this mental endurance shaped effectiveness. Was the Finnish sniper's advantage mainly his camouflage and terrain, or his ability to keep still in mind as well as body? Some scholars emphasize the physical, clothing, skis, rifles. Others insist it was psychological resilience, what Finns call sisu, that made the difference. The debate is lively because sisu is notoriously hard to define. Is it grit, stubbornness, courage, madness? Perhaps all of the above. The longer you lie there, the more you understand why debates exist. Your muscles ache, but the real test is in your head. You imagine standing, screaming just to hear a sound. You picture walking away, letting the snow bury the nest. But you stay, not because you're braver than others, but because something inside refuses to yield. Call it stubbornness, call it discipline, call it sisu. Whatever its name, it keeps you still when reason whispers otherwise. You start playing small games. Count to 100 breaths without moving. Guess the exact second the next gust of wind will shake snow from a branch. Pretend you're invisible, not just to the Soviets, but to the entire universe. If no one sees you, do you even exist? The thought almost makes you chuckle. Congratulations, I've become a philosopher by lying in frozen mud. And humor, once again, keeps you sane. You imagine telling your friends back home, yes, I risked my life so I could invent a new record for staying perfectly still. No medals yet, but plenty of frostbite. Or, I'm not a sniper, I'm a snowman with commitment issues. You almost laugh, but you hold it in, because laughter is movement, and movement is death. Still, the inner smile eases the tension. The forest tests you with tricks of perception. Out of the corner of your eye, you think you see figures moving. Shapes shift in the twilight. Your brain tries to fill gaps, painting Soviets into shadows. You breathe slower, steadying yourself, reminding your mind that the birch stump hasn't walked in the past 3 hours. But the paranoia is real. Historians note cases where jumpy soldiers fired at trees, convinced they were targets. Fatigue and imagination can kill as easily as bullets. You whisper a line of a song, muffled through the towel, and return to your breath. Your chest rises and falls, your mind teeters between clarity and nonsense. But that's the sniper's vigil. Half freezing, half dreaming, half alive or waiting. It isn't glamorous. It isn't even heroic. It's stubborn, absurd patience stretched across a landscape of white. And as you lie there, numb and hungry, the aurora fading above, you realize the snow has made you a paradox too. Part man, part statue, part shadow. A presence and an absence at once. The Soviets may never know you're here, and perhaps that's the point. Invisibility isn't just camouflage. It's erasing yourself until only the shot remains. Your eyes sweep across the frozen tree line, but you don't see movement. You sense it. Somewhere out there, another sniper is doing the same thing you are. Lying still, waiting, trying not to breathe too loudly. It's the duel of invisibility, and you may never even meet face to face. The duel is not about speed or even marksmanship. It's about patience, nerves, and who twitches first. You know they're there because the Soviets had their own sharpshooters. Not as famous in the Finnish imagination as Simo Heiha, but dangerous nonetheless. The Red Army, slow to adapt at first, eventually learned from bitter experience that wandering soldiers kept vanishing to invisible bullets. They began to train their own hunters, and then the snow wasn't just a blanket to hide beneath, it was a chessboard. Here's a mainstream fact. Sniper duels were very real in the Winter War. Finnish and Soviet. Sharpshooters stalked each other in the woods, sometimes spending days waiting for the other to make a mistake. Accounts describe careful tricks, placing a helmet on a stick above a snowbank to draw fire, or deliberately leaving a trail in the snow only to double back and ambush the follower. These weren't just battles of bullets, but of psychology. You lie motionless, wondering if right now some Soviet's eye is pressed to a sight, staring at what he thinks might be your outline. Do you shift? Do you risk confirming it? Or do you wait until he tires and his focus slips? The snow is impartial. It hides you both, it numbs you both. Quirky details float into your thoughts. Some veterans said they set out twigs or patches of cloth to act as decoys, hoping the enemy would shoot and reveal themselves. Others swore they could sense another sniper nearby the way a hunter feels a predator's gaze. No sound, no sight, just the uncanny tingle of being watched. Was it instinct, coincidence, or just nerves turning paranoia into superstition? Historians debate whether these legendary duels were common or rare. Some argue that stories of day-long stare-downs are exaggerated, told later as heroic yarns. Others insist the psychological stalemate was real, that snipers truly spent entire nights locked in invisible contests. The evidence is scattered, but the imagery endures. Two men buried in snow, both waiting for the other to stop being snow first. The tension is real enough. You know, one mistake, one careless puff of breath, one flash of metal, one twitch too obvious, and the duel ends with no warning. You feel your muscles begging to shift. Your eyes sting from not blinking enough. Your nose itches with frost, but you don't move. You picture the other man, out there in his own nest, fighting the same urges. In a way, you almost feel kinship. And then humor comes crawling in, uninvited but welcome. You imagine writing to him across the frozen void. "Dear Soviet sniper, how long have you been lying here? Sincerely, bored in Karelia." Or you picture the both of you frozen in place so long that spring arrives, and two skeletons sit staring at each other across a meadow. Morbid, yes, but in the absurdity you find relief. Still, you respect the duel. It sharpens you, forces you to discipline every twitch and thought. It reminds you that invisibility is not a solo performance. It's a contest, a mirror held up by an unseen rival. You don't know who will win, or if anyone will. All you know is that silence reigns, snow presses down, and you remain a shadow among shadows, waiting. Your fingers, stiff with cold, curl around the rifle stock, and you're reminded again that this long, silent duel with winter is not fought with bare hands. It's fought with a piece of steel and wood that is as temperamental as the snow itself. The rifle is lifeline and liability all at once. Without it, you are just another frozen figure in white. With it, you are a threat, a shadow, a patient hunter. And yet it constantly threatens to betray you if you don't respect its quirks. Tonight, your mind lingers on the constant debates that swirl around the Finnish Mosin Nagant you clutch. Debates carried by soldiers in dugouts, by veterans at reunions, and later by historians in lecture halls. To the untrained eye, it looks battered and plain. But in Karelia's forests, this rifle was everything. The Mosin Nagant wasn't unique to the Finns. It was also the standard rifle of the Soviet army, mass-produced and issued by the millions. But the Finnish army had inherited its own versions, captured stocks and refurbished models from earlier conflicts, and their armorers reworked them meticulously. The barrels were remachined for accuracy. The triggers adjusted. Even the stocks were sometimes modified. The result was a weapon that, in the right hands, could fire true in conditions that broke lesser rifles. Here's the mainstream fact. Finnish snipers, including the legendary Simo Häyhä, often preferred to use iron sights instead of telescopic scopes. It sounds counterintuitive. Why refuse magnification? But there were good reasons. A scope could reflect sunlight, a fatal glint on a snowy field. It forced the shooter to raise his head higher, making his silhouette easier to spot. And in bitter cold, scopes fogged and iced over, sometimes freezing to the face. Iron sights, humble and reliable, kept the profile low and the view clear. Häyhä himself made this choice, and it became part of his legend. But soldiers being soldiers, not everyone agreed. Some swore by scopes, arguing that the magnification gave you just enough edge to guarantee a shot. Others cursed them as useless luxuries, better suited for parades than snowfields. Even today, historians argue over whether scopes were more hindrance than help in Karelia. Were they really so impractical? Or is that explanation part of the mythology built around iron sight masters like Häyhä? No clear answer exists, only a debate frozen in time. You think of the quirky workarounds men used. Some who insisted on scopes wrapped them in cloth or leather scraps, tucking them under coats until the moment of firing. A few tried rubbing candle wax on the lenses to stop frost, with mixed results. Others treated scopes like fragile pets, fussing over them constantly. The image is almost comical. A hardened sniper cooing over a scope like it's a baby bird, while the man next to him shrugs and trusts his bare iron sights. Your own rifle, stripped of oil and swaddled in rags, feels more like a companion than a tool. Hours of stillness do strange things to a mind. You start to talk to it, whispering encouragement through your scarf. "Don't freeze now," you murmur. The words dampened by your towel. It sounds foolish, but you've heard others do the same. One friend named his rifle Lisa, after a girl back home. He claimed Lisa never betrayed him, unlike the real one who'd married another man while he was away. Bitter humor, but it kept him warm. You can picture future historians debating all this in warm classrooms. Professors leaning on podiums, arguing whether scopes fogged as badly as veterans claimed, whether Finnish rifles really were superior, whether the White Death's choice was brilliance or mere habit. And you almost laugh into your towel at the thought. If only they could trade places for 1 hour. If they could press their faces to freezing metal, feel skin stick to steel, watch breath betray them through a glass lens, they'd end the debate quickly. Out here, theory means nothing. Out here, what works in your hands is truth enough. There's a quirky bit of soldier humor tied to rifles, too. Some Finns joked that their mosin doubled as a shovel, a ski pole, or even a crutch when boots wore through. One man claimed he used his rifle as a broom to clear snow from his pit. Another swore you could play music by blowing across the barrel like a flute, though of course no one dared test that in the field. The mosin nagant was heavy, awkward, old-fashioned, but it was also unbreakable. And in Karelia, unbreakable was better than elegant. Historians argue over another detail as well, accuracy. Were the Finnish reworked mosins significantly more precise than their Soviet counterparts, or was the difference mainly in the men using them? Finnish hunters grew up shooting at game in forests, trained from childhood in patience and precision. Soviets drafted from cities and villages often had less experience with marksmanship. Was it the rifle or the man behind it? The debate continues. But lying here with your rifle snug against your cheek, you know the answer is both. A good rifle in bad hands is useless. A good man with a bad rifle is limited. Together, though, man and weapon form something dangerous. Your rifle right now is heavy but comforting. You've memorized its every sound. The way the bolt slides, the weight of the trigger pull, the faint vibration through the stock. It is familiar. And familiarity is a kind of warmth. When the forest is alien and the snow endless, the rifle reminds you that you still have control over one small thing. You shift slightly, brushing snow from the wrapped barrel, and whisper again. Not a prayer, not even a plea, just a small reminder. Stay with me, because you know the truth. You can have all the patience in the world, all the camouflage tricks and animal fat and towels. But if your rifle fails, you are nothing but another frozen soldier in a pit. Snow hides you, discipline keeps you still, but the rifle is the only thing that gives you teeth. And for all its quirks, for all the debates about scopes and sights, it has not failed you yet. You let your cheek rest against the stock, feeling the cold seep into your skin, and close your eyes for a heartbeat. Out here, the line between man and rifle blurs. You are not just a soldier in snow. You are an eye, a finger, and a barrel, bound together, patient, waiting. The world narrows when you finally see movement. For hours, the forest has been static. Trees stiff, snow silent, shadows frozen in place. Then at last a figure stirs against the white horizon. It is faint, almost blending into the drifts, but your eye, trained by endless waiting, catches it instantly. Too dark to be snow. Too deliberate to be a branch. Someone is walking out there. You don't shift much. Haruki might lift their head suddenly, eager to confirm the sight. But eagerness kills. Instead, you keep your body pressed into the nest, your cheek against the stalk, and you let your gaze settle, patient, careful. Your pulse quickens, but your breathing remains steady, muffled by the towel across your mouth. After hours of stillness, your moment has come. The figure trudges clumsily, boots crunching faintly in a rhythm that betrays a human gait. You watch the arc of the shoulders, the outline of the helmet, the swing of arms. Soviet, almost certainly. You don't know if he is an officer, a scout, or simply unlucky. But here in Karelia, every Soviet is part of the same invading tide, and each one that falls is one less pressing against your homeland. Here's the mainstream fact. Finnish snipers rarely fired more than 1 or 2 shots from a single position. The forest carried sound in strange ways. Even with snow muffling noise, a rifle's crack echoed far, and the Soviets learned quickly to triangulate fire. Patrols would converge on any hint of a sniper's nest, sometimes with grenades, sometimes with entire squads. That is why the first shot mattered most. You didn't just need to hit, you needed to hit clean, then vanish before the forest swallowed you in turn. You adjust the rifle minutely, iron sights aligned with the moving figure. Slowly, slowly, every joint in your body protests after hours of stillness, but you move as though your bones are gears in a clock. One wrong motion, one loud creak of frozen cloth, and you undo all your patience. Quirky habits return to you now, rituals soldiers swore by before pulling the trigger. One man claimed he always hummed a tune in his head, keeping rhythm so his finger would squeeze smoothly instead of jerking. Another said he tapped his boot once, as if knocking on snow to announce, "Here it comes." You find yourself remembering a lullaby your mother used to sing, the melody faint in your thoughts. Absurd, yes, but it steadies your breathing. Historians still argue about the sound of the shot itself. Some insist that snow muffled rifles so well that Finnish snipers seemed like phantoms, their fire a dull thud lost in the wind. Others counter that in sub-zero air the crack was sharp, carrying for kilometers. Both can be true. Diaries describe soldiers convinced they heard shots all around them, unable to tell if they were echoes or real. Fear turned forests into amplifiers of imagination. The figure draws nearer. You judge the distance, 150 meters give or take. Well within the comfort of your sights, your finger finds the trigger, and you breathe shallowly through the towel. Inhale, exhale, pause. This is the rhythm that matters, the dance between heartbeat and breath. Every sniper knows it. Squeeze in the stillness between pulses. You press gently. Never jerk, never rush, just steady pressure until the rifle kicks lightly against your shoulder. A muted crack rolls through the trees, swallowed quickly by snow. For a split second, the forest feels suspended, as if the aurora itself has frozen overhead to watch. But discipline overrides instinct. You do not lift your head. You do not watch to see if the figure falls. Haruki might celebrate confirming the kill, but veterans know better. The shot is only half the battle. The greater test is what comes after. You lower yourself deeper into the nest, cheek pressed to rags, eyes half closed as though you've vanished into the snow itself. You are stillness again. Whether you hit or missed, whether that Soviet staggers or collapses, you cannot know yet, and you cannot afford to reveal yourself by looking. The silence after the shot is the most dangerous silence of all. A scrap of humor flickers, absurd as always. You imagine the snow itself patting you on the back. Nice shot. Now don't ruin it by moving, idiot. You almost chuckle into the towel but restrain yourself. Even laughter is movement, and movement is betrayal. Time stretches again. The forest absorbs the sound, then resumes its indifference. No shouts, no gunfire in return, not yet. You remain stone, body aching, waiting to see if the world reacts. And in this waiting, you feel the essence of sniping distilled. It is not glamour. It is not cinematic glory. It is the patience to lie still for hours, the focus to make one clean shot, and the discipline to become invisible afterward. The rifle fires once, but the silence fires again and again every second you refuse to move. Historians write of snipers as hunters, but you know better. You are not a wolf stalking prey. You are a shadow that erases itself. Your victory lies not in the body that may or may not be lying in the snow ahead, but in the fact that no one knows you are here. Minutes pass. The forest stays quiet. Slowly, painfully, you let yourself believe that the danger has not found you. Not yet. The Soviets may stumble upon the body later. They may curse the White Death or mutter about invisible fins. But for now you are just snow again. Another drift among many. The shot is done. The silence holds. And you are alive. The echo of the rifle has long since dissolved into the trees, leaving nothing but your breath damp inside the towel and the pounding of your heart. You lie motionless, every muscle begging to shift, but you know the greater trial has only begun. The shot is the easy part. What comes after? The silence, the stillness. That is where survival hangs in the balance. Your body screams to move. Your arms ache from holding the same position for hours. Your cheek burns where skin touches frozen cloth, and your legs throb with pins and needles. Every instinct urges you to lift your head, to see if your target fell, to roll your shoulders, to shake off the stiffness. But instinct is your enemy. A single twitch could undo everything. So you stay. You remain a lump of snow, invisible, waiting for the forest to forget you. Here's the mainstream fact. Finnish snipers were taught that after a shot, patience was more valuable than bullets. Many accounts describe men lying motionless for an hour or more after firing, resisting cramps and hunger, until Soviet patrols abandoned their search. If you shifted too soon, the enemy would close in. If you waited, the snow would erase you. This discipline turned lone snipers into specters, never seen, only feared. The forest feels alive now, listening for you. You imagine Soviet soldiers freezing in place across the trees, straining to catch the faintest sound. Maybe they whisper to each other. Maybe they raise binoculars. Maybe they circle wide. You cannot know. Your job is not to guess, but to remain still enough that even suspicion loses interest. Quirky coping tricks float into your memory, soldiers' little rituals for enduring these unbearable weights. Some carried twigs or strips of leather to chew, channeling nerves into their jaws instead of their muscles. Others whispered riddles into their scarves, absurd puzzles to distract the mind from cramps. What walks on skis at dawn, vanishes at noon, and freezes at night? The riddle goes. Answer you. Grim humor, but humor nonetheless. One comrade once joked that sniping wasn't about shooting. It was about winning the staring contest with the snow. That line stuck with you, and as your eyes water from refusing to blink too much, you realize he wasn't wrong. Historians still argue about how long snipers really stayed put. Some claim the hours-long vigils are exaggerated, stories told afterward, to make endurance sound heroic. Others point to diaries that describe men nearly frozen solid in their nests before daring to crawl away. The truth likely varied. Sometimes relocation was immediate, sometimes waiting was the only option. But either way, the principle was clear. After the shot, you vanished into stillness or you died. Your nose itches fiercely now, and you want nothing more than to scratch it. But you resist. You think of a comrade who once gave in to that urge, shifting his hand upward, and a Soviet sniper's bullet slammed into the snow inches from his head. He never forgot the lesson. Even the smallest indulgence can draw death. You grit your teeth, let the itch burn, and remind yourself it will fade. The silence stretches, oppressive and absolute. No birds call. No branches crack. The only sound is wind sighing through treetops, occasionally dislodging a soft cascade of flakes. Each noise makes your pulse leap, convinced it's boots or voices. You remind yourself again. Patience is the weapon now. You already fired your bullet. Invisibility is your second shot. You try to occupy your mind. You count breaths, slow and even. 10, 20, 50. You imagine writing a letter to your future self. Congratulations. You've spent 3 hours pretending to be snow. The world's least glamorous medal is in the mail. The absurdity makes you smile inwardly, though your face doesn't move. Humor isn't luxury, it's oxygen. Without it, the silence would crush you. Time feels liquid. Minutes could be seconds or hours. Your body aches more with each moment, but you force yourself into the rhythm of endurance. You've learned to think of yourself less as a man and more as an object. Snowdrift, rock log. You imagine roots growing from your body into the frozen ground. If the Soviets are still scanning, they'll see nothing unusual. Just another frozen shape among many. And you wonder if they're out there, eyes straining, convinced they feel your presence. Some veterans swore they could sense when an enemy sniper was watching, like a prickling in the skin. Maybe a Soviet across the tree line is feeling that now. But he can't prove it. He won't see you. Not if you remain snow. Your rifle rests heavy, still warm from the shot, but you resist the urge to cycle the bolt. Even the faint click of steel would betray you. Instead, you let it lie. Breath-dampening cloth, muscles trembling from restraint. You've become nothing more than patience wrapped in rags. Historians sometimes call this the sniper's paradox. The most dangerous man on the battlefield is also the one who moves the least. Not through aggression, but through stillness. It feels strange to think of it this way. You don't feel dangerous. You feel numb, cramped, hungry, yet the silence proves otherwise. The Soviets may never know your name, but they'll curse the phantom who made them afraid to step into clearings. More minutes pass. No search party appears. No answering fire cracks the silence. Slowly, you begin to believe the danger has passed. You're still not free to move, not yet. But the tension in your chest loosens by a thread. You've endured another vigil, another test of stillness, and you realize something simple. The rifle's crack may have frightened men, but it's the silence afterward that makes legends. Not the bullet, but the waiting. That's what turns you from soldier to shadow. You remain where you are, cheek pressed against cold cloth, body aching but presence erased. After the shot comes silence, and in that silence you survive. You squint against the horizon, but the world glares back. Snow isn't just white, it is blinding. Under the pale winter sun, the fields glitter like endless mirrors, every flake throwing light into your eyes until your vision stings and swims. The rifle feels steady under your hands, but your sight, the one thing a sniper cannot afford to lose, is under constant attack. At first you think it's just fatigue, a trick of waiting too long. But then the pain grows sharper, like grit lodged beneath your eyelids. You blink rapidly, but blinking makes the glare worse. It's snow blindness, the invisible enemy that creeps in without warning. Just as dangerous as frostbite, maybe more. Here's the mainstream fact. Snow blindness plagued soldiers on the Northern Front throughout the Winter War. It wasn't caused by snow itself, but by the invisible ultraviolet rays reflected by ice and frozen ground. Just as sunburn scorches skin, snow blindness scorched the eyes, inflaming the corneas, until men were left in agony. Symptoms ranged from watering and swelling to outright blindness for days. It struck skiers, scouts and snipers alike, anyone forced to stare across white plains for hours. You rub your face against your sleeve, careful not to move too much, and think about the crude defenses men invented. Goggles were scarce, and proper protective lenses scarcer still. So soldiers improvised. Some cut strips of birch bark, carving narrow slits in them like ancient Inuit snow goggles. Others scavenged smoked glass from shattered lanterns, awkward shards tied across their eyes with string. A few even used slabs of ice polished thin. Absurd as that sounds, anything that cut the glare was treasure. Quirky stories litter the veterans' accounts. One man swore by rubbing soot around his eyes, leaving himself looking like a panda bear, but he insisted it dulled the reflection. Another tied horsehair across his face like a curtain, muttering that he looked less like a sniper and more like a broom. Some soldiers simply squinted until it became second nature, walking around camp looking permanently suspicious, as though mistrusting even the trees. Squint long enough, one joked, and you forget what wide eyes ever felt like. Historians still debate how widespread and debilitating snow blindness really was. Some argue it crippled whole units, forcing men to stumble back from the front clutching their faces, their eyes red and swollen shut. Others suggest it was less dramatic, more a constant nuisance than a catastrophe. Diaries support both views. Some entries describe men nearly incapacitated, while others mention it only in passing, as one more discomfort among many. As with so much in Karelia, the truth was uneven, deadly for some, tolerable for others. For a sniper, though, even nuisance could be fatal. Your rifle is useless if your vision fails. You think of how bitterly ironic it would be to spend hours lying still, perfect in camouflage, only to miss the shot because the snow burned your eyes raw. The thought almost makes you laugh, grim as it is. Imagine telling your commander, "I didn't miss, sir, the snow blinded me." The humor keeps you sane. You imagine advertising snow blindness back home as a luxury spa treatment. Come to Karelia. Free eye burn included with every frozen bread ration. See the northern lights once, then never again. You smirk into your towel, careful to keep it small. The joke is bleak, but so is everything here. Better to laugh than surrender to the pain. The glare grows worse as the sun climbs higher. You squint harder, narrowing your vision to slits, scanning through the brightness for any flicker of movement. The trick is to use shadows, to look for the unnatural shapes amid the shimmering light. Training and instinct take over where your eyes falter. You remember comrades who bragged about their makeshift fixes. One carried a shard of tinted glass wrapped in cloth, swearing it saved his sight. Another claimed he never looked directly at snowfields, only off to the side, using peripheral vision like an animal. These little tricks, half science and half superstition, kept men alive. Perhaps not comfortable, but alive, and the debates don't end. Even now, historians puzzle over whether snow blindness affected the Winter War's outcome. Did it slow patrols? Did it hinder snipers more than frostbite or hunger? Or was it simply another layer of misery, lost in the long list of winter's cruelties? The evidence refuses neat answers. For you, though, there's no debate. You feel the sting in your eyes and you know it's real. You force yourself to endure. Pain, after all, is proof you can still see. True blindness would bring only darkness. So you accept the burning, the watering, the endless squinting. Better to ache than to lose sight entirely. You tell yourself the pain is a tax you pay for invisibility, one more toll demanded by the snow. And as always, humor returns to soften the edge. You imagine writing home. "Dear mother, please send bread, socks, and 2 new eyeballs." Or perhaps advertising yourself as a new kind of soldier. Not sniper, not scout, just professional squinter. The absurdity helps. Laughter is a shield, even if it's only in your head. The forest wavers under the glare, shimmering as though alive. You know your eyes are playing tricks. Branches seem to shift. Snowdrifts crawl at the edges of vision. You blink hard. Steady yourself. Remind your mind not to chase illusions. Many men fired at phantoms this way, convinced they saw movement where none existed. Snow blindness isn't just physical, it's psychological too. It plants doubts, turns shadows into enemies. You lie back deeper into your nest, eyes narrowed, towel damp, rifle steady. You may be half blind, but you are still here, still hidden, still dangerous. The snow may burn your eyes, but it hasn't erased your patience. And patience, not vision, is the sniper's true weapon. The glare will fade eventually. Night will come, the aurora will return, and your sight will recover, if you last that long. For now you squint through pain and wait. Snow has taken warmth, comfort, and now vision, but it hasn't taken your will. And as long as you can still see enough to aim, enough to remain invisible, you endure. The cold doesn't relent, not after minutes, not after hours, not after days. You learn quickly that survival isn't about grand heroics. It's about a patchwork of small, ridiculous tricks strung together like stitches. Each one sounds laughable when told out loud, but in Karelia's winter, every scrap of wisdom is another chance to see morning. Your boots are the first battlefield. Frost creeps into them the way smoke creeps under a door, slow, invisible, inevitable. You wriggle your toes, feeling the scratch of hay packed inside your socks. It isn't comfortable. It itches, pricks, and sometimes shifts into lumps. But it's insulation, and insulation means life. Some men used moss instead, soft and absorbent. Others shredded potato peels and stuffed them into socks, swearing the starch kept frostbite at bay. It sounds like superstition, but then again, superstition is just survival wearing a disguise. Here's the mainstream fact. Frostbite casualties were staggering during the Winter War, sometimes rivaling combat losses. Medical reports show men arriving at aid stations with blackened toes, hands swollen like clubs, ears stiff as leather. Preventing frostbite became as critical as dodging bullets. Commanders encouraged improvisation because there weren't enough proper supplies. Official wool socks ran short, and boots wore thin. So soldiers borrowed from hunters, peasants, and each other, cobbling together defenses from whatever they could scavenge. The tricks didn't end with socks. Soldiers dug shallow channels under their pits to urinate, preventing steam from rising and giving away their positions. Some carried bottles to avoid moving at all. Others rubbed candle wax along the seams of coats and boots, sealing gaps against the wind. You remember one man who filled his gloves with newspaper. By nightfall, the paper froze stiff, but for a few hours it gave warmth. Another swore that smearing animal fat inside his boots kept his feet safe. It smelled atrocious, but no one argued when he walked out of the season with all 10 toes. Quirky tales abound in veterans' memories. One soldier claimed he once slept with a hot stone from a campfire, wrapped in cloth and tucked against his chest. Another hugged his rifle through the night, insisting that keeping the steel warm was more important than keeping himself warm. A third admitted, half embarrassed, that he wore women's stockings under his uniform trousers. When comrades teased him, he only grinned. "Laugh all you want. My legs are warmer than yours." Historians still debate how effective these odd methods really were. Did hay socks and candle wax really prevent frostbite? Or are these just colorful stories told afterward? Survivorship bias wrapped in nostalgia. Some argue that nothing short of proper gear truly worked, and that frostbite was mostly a matter of luck and rotation. Others insist these tiny hacks were vital, shaving just enough cold off to tip the balance. As with so many things in Karelia, the truth probably lies somewhere in between. You adjust the rifle minutely, iron sights aligned with the moving figure. Slowly, slowly, every joint in your body protests after hours of stillness, but you move as though your bones are gears in a clock. One wrong motion, one loud creak of frozen cloth, and you undo all your patience. Quirky habits return to you now, rituals soldiers swore by before pulling the trigger. One man claimed he always hummed a tune in his head, keeping rhythm so his finger would squeeze smoothly instead of jerking. Another said he tapped his boot once, as if knocking on snow to announce, "Here it comes." You find yourself remembering a lullaby your mother used to sing, the melody faint in your thoughts. Absurd, yes, but it steadies your breathing. Historians still argue about the sound of the shot itself. Some insist that snow muffled rifles so well that Finnish snipers seemed like phantoms, their fire a dull thud lost in the wind. Others counter that in sub-zero air the crack was sharp, carrying for kilometers. Both can be true. Diaries describe soldiers convinced they heard shots all around them, unable to tell if they were echoes or real. Fear turned forests into amplifiers of imagination. The figure draws nearer. You judge the distance, 150 meters give or take. Well within the comfort of your sights, your finger finds the trigger, and you breathe shallowly through the towel. Inhale, exhale, pause. This is the rhythm that matters, the dance between heartbeat and breath. Every sniper knows it. Squeeze in the stillness between pulses. You press gently. Never jerk, never rush, just steady pressure until the rifle kicks lightly against your shoulder. A muted crack rolls through the trees, swallowed quickly by snow. For a split second, the forest feels suspended, as if the aurora itself has frozen overhead to watch. But discipline overrides instinct. You do not lift your head. You do not watch to see if the figure falls. A rookie might celebrate confirming the kill, but veterans know better. The shot is only half the battle. The greater test is what comes after. You lower yourself deeper into the nest, cheek pressed to rags, eyes half closed as though you vanished into the snow itself. You are stillness again. Whether you hit or missed, whether that Soviet staggers or collapses, you cannot know yet, and you cannot afford to reveal yourself by looking. The silence after the shot is the most dangerous silence of all. A scrap of humor flickers, absurd as always. You imagine the snow itself patting you on the back. Nice shot. Now don't ruin it by moving, idiot. You almost chuckle into the towel but restrain yourself. Even laughter is movement, and movement is betrayal. Time stretches again. The forest absorbs the sound, then resumes its indifference. No shouts, no gunfire in return, not yet. You remain stone, body aching, waiting to see if the world reacts. And in this waiting, you feel the essence of sniping distilled. It is not glamour. It is not cinematic glory. It is the patience to lie still for hours, the focus to make one clean shot, and the discipline to become invisible afterward. The rifle fires once, But the silence fires again and again every second you refuse to move. Historians write of snipers as hunters, but you know better. You are not a wolf stalking prey. You are a shadow that erases itself. Your victory lies not in the body that may or may not be lying in the snow ahead, but in the fact that no one knows you are here. Minutes pass. The forest stays quiet. Slowly, painfully, you let yourself believe that the danger has not found you. Not yet. The Soviets may stumble upon the body later. They may curse the White Death or mutter about invisible fins. But for now you are just snow again. Another drift among many. The shot is done. The silence holds. And you are alive. The echo of the rifle has long since dissolved into the trees, leaving nothing but your breath damp inside the towel and the pounding of your heart. You lie motionless, every muscle begging to shift, but you know the greater trial has only begun. The shot is the easy part. What comes after? The silence, the stillness. That is where survival hangs in the balance. Your body screams to move. Your arms ache from holding the same position for hours. Your cheek burns where skin touches frozen cloth, and your legs throb with pins and needles. Every instinct urges you to lift your head, to see if your target fell, to roll your shoulders, to shake off the stiffness. But instinct is your enemy. A single twitch could undo everything. So you stay. You remain a lump of snow, invisible, waiting for the forest to forget you. Here's the mainstream fact. Finnish snipers were taught that after a shot, patience was more valuable than bullets. Many accounts describe men lying motionless for an hour or more after firing, resisting cramps and hunger, until Soviet patrols abandoned their search. If you shifted too soon, the enemy would close in. If you waited, the snow would erase you. This discipline turned lone snipers into specters, never seen, only feared. The forest feels alive now, listening for you. You imagine Soviet soldiers freezing in place across the trees, straining to catch the faintest sound. Maybe they whisper to each other. Maybe they raise binoculars. Maybe they circle wide. You cannot know. Your job is not to guess, but to remain still enough that even suspicion loses interest. Quirky coping tricks float into your memory, soldiers' little rituals for enduring these unbearable weights. Some carried twigs or strips of leather to chew, channeling nerves into their jaws instead of their muscles. Others whispered riddles into their scarves, absurd puzzles to distract the mind from cramps. What walks on skis at dawn, vanishes at noon and freezes at night? The riddle goes. Answer you. Grim humor, but humor nonetheless. One comrade once joked that sniping wasn't about shooting. It was about winning the staring contest with the snow. That line stuck with you, and as your eyes water from refusing to blink too much, you realize he wasn't wrong. Historians still argue about how long snipers really stayed put. Some claim the hours-long vigils are exaggerated, stories told afterward, to make endurance sound heroic. Others point to diaries that describe men nearly frozen solid in their nests before daring to crawl away. The truth likely varied. Sometimes relocation was immediate, sometimes waiting was the only option. But either way, the principle was clear. After the shot, you vanished into stillness or you died. Your nose itches fiercely now, and you want nothing more than to scratch it. But you resist. You think of a comrade who once gave in to that urge, shifting his hand upward, and a Soviet sniper's bullet slammed into the snow inches from his head. He never forgot the lesson. Even the smallest indulgence can draw death. You grit your teeth, let the itch burn, and remind yourself it will fade. The silence stretches, oppressive and absolute. No birds call. No branches crack. The only sound is wind sighing through treetops, occasionally dislodging a soft cascade of flakes. Each noise makes your pulse leap, convinced it's boots or voices. You remind yourself again. Patience is the weapon now. You already fired your bullet. Invisibility is your second shot. You try to occupy your mind. You count breaths slow and even. 10, 20, 50. You imagine writing a letter to your future self. Congratulations. You've spent 3 hours pretending to be Snow. The world's least glamorous medal is in the mail. The absurdity makes you smile inwardly, though your face doesn't move. Humor isn't luxury, it's oxygen. Without it, the silence would crush you. Time feels liquid. Minutes could be seconds or hours. Your body aches more with each moment, but you force yourself into the rhythm of endurance. You've learned to think of yourself less as a man and more as an object. Snowdrift, rock log. You imagine roots growing from your body into the frozen ground. If the Soviets are still scanning, they'll see nothing unusual. Just another frozen shape among many. And you wonder if they're out there, eyes straining, convinced they feel your presence. Some veterans swore they could sense when an enemy sniper was watching, like a prickling in the skin. Maybe a Soviet across the tree line is feeling that now. But he can't prove it. He won't see you. Not if you remain Snow. Your rifle rests heavy, still warm from the shot, but you resist the urge to cycle the bolt. Even the faint click of steel would betray you. Instead, you let it lie. Breath-dampening cloth, muscles trembling from restraint. You've become nothing more than patience wrapped in rags. Historians sometimes call this the sniper's paradox. The most dangerous man on the battlefield is also the one who moves the least. Not through aggression, but through stillness. It feels strange to think of it this way. You don't feel dangerous. You feel numb, cramped, hungry, yet the silence proves otherwise. The Soviets may never know your name, but they'll curse the phantom who made them afraid to step into clearings. More minutes pass. No search party appears. No answering fire cracks the silence. Slowly, you begin to believe the danger has passed. You're still not free to move, not yet. But the tension in your chest loosens by a thread. You've endured another vigil, another test of stillness, and you realize something simple. The rifle's crack may have frightened men, but it's the silence afterward that makes legends. Not the bullet, but the waiting. That's what turns you from soldier to shadow. You remain where you are, cheek pressed against cold cloth, body aching but presence erased. After the shot comes silence, and in that silence you survive. You squint against the horizon, but the world glares back. Snow isn't just white, it is blinding. Under the pale winter sun, the fields glitter like endless mirrors, every flake throwing light into your eyes until your vision stings and swims. The rifle feels steady under your hands, but your sight, the one thing a sniper cannot afford to lose, is under constant attack. At first you think it's just fatigue, a trick of waiting too long. But then the pain grows sharper, like grit lodged beneath your eyelids. You blink rapidly, but blinking makes the glare worse. It's snow blindness, the invisible enemy that creeps in without warning. Just as dangerous as frostbite, maybe more. Here's the mainstream fact. Snow blindness plagued soldiers on the Northern Front throughout the Winter War. It wasn't caused by snow itself, but by the invisible ultraviolet rays reflected by ice and frozen ground. Just as sunburn scorches skin, snow blindness scorched the eyes, inflaming the corneas, until men were left in agony. Symptoms ranged from watering and swelling to outright blindness for days. It struck skiers, scouts, and snipers alike, anyone forced to stare across white plains for hours. You rub your face against your sleeve, Careful not to move too much, and think about the crude defenses men invented. Goggles were scarce, and proper protective lenses scarcer still. So soldiers improvised. Some cut strips of birch bark, carving narrow slits in them like ancient Inuit snow goggles. Others scavenged smoked glass from shattered lanterns, awkward shards tied across their eyes with string. A few even used slabs of ice polished thin. Absurd as that sounds, anything that cut the glare was treasure. Quirky stories litter the veterans' accounts. One man swore by rubbing soot around his eyes, leaving himself looking like a panda bear, but he insisted it dulled the reflection. Another tied horsehair across his face like a curtain, muttering that he looked less like a sniper and more like a broom. Some soldiers simply squinted until it became second nature, walking around camp looking permanently suspicious, as though mistrusting even the trees. Squint long enough, one joked, and you forget what wide eyes ever felt like. Historians still debate how widespread and debilitating snow blindness really was. Some argue it crippled whole units, forcing men to stumble back from the front clutching their faces, their eyes red and swollen shut. Others suggest it was less dramatic, more a constant nuisance than a catastrophe. Diaries support both views. Some entries describe men nearly incapacitated, while others mention it only in passing, as one more discomfort among many. As with so much in Karelia, the truth was uneven, deadly for some, tolerable for others. For a sniper, though, even nuisance could be fatal. Your rifle is useless if your vision fails. You think of how bitterly ironic it would be to spend hours lying still, perfect in camouflage, only to miss the shot because the snow burned your eyes raw. The thought almost makes you laugh, grim as it is. Imagine telling your commander, "I didn't miss, sir, the snow blinded me." The humor keeps you sane. You imagine advertising snow blindness back home as a luxury spa treatment. Come to Karelia. Free eye burn included with every frozen bread ration. See the northern lights once, then never again. You smirk into your towel, careful to keep it small. The joke is bleak, but so is everything here. Better to laugh than surrender to the pain. The glare grows worse as the sun climbs higher. You squint harder, narrowing your vision to slits, scanning through the brightness for any flicker of movement. The trick is to use shadows, to look for the unnatural shapes amid the shimmering light. Training and instinct take over where your eyes falter. You remember comrades who bragged about their makeshift fixes. One carried a shard of tinted glass wrapped in cloth, swearing it saved his sight. Another claimed he never looked directly at snowfields, only off to the side, using peripheral vision like an animal. These little tricks, half science and half superstition, kept men alive. Perhaps not comfortable, but alive, and the debates don't end. Even now, historians puzzle over whether snow blindness affected the Winter War's outcome. Did it slow patrols? Did it hinder snipers more than frostbite or hunger? Or was it simply another layer of misery, lost in the long list of winter's cruelties? The evidence refuses neat answers. For you, though, there's no debate. You feel the sting in your eyes and you know it's real. You force yourself to endure. Pain, after all, is proof you can still see. True blindness would bring only darkness. So you accept the burning, the watering, the endless squinting. Better to ache than to lose sight entirely. You tell yourself the pain is a tax you pay for invisibility, one more toll demanded by the snow. And as always, humor returns to soften the edge. You imagine writing home, "Dear mother, please send bread, socks, and 2 new eyeballs." Or perhaps advertising yourself as a new kind of soldier. Not sniper, not scout, just professional squinter. The absurdity helps. Laughter is a shield, even if it's only in your head. The forest wavers under the glare, shimmering as though alive. You know your eyes are playing tricks. Branches seem to shift. Snowdrifts crawl at the edges of vision. You blink hard. Steady yourself. Remind your mind not to chase illusions. Many men fired at phantoms this way, convinced they saw movement where none existed. Snowblindness isn't just physical, it's psychological too. It plants doubts, turns shadows into enemies. You lie back deeper into your nest, eyes narrowed, towel damp, rifle steady. You may be half-blind, but you are still here, still hidden, still dangerous. The snow may burn your eyes, but it hasn't erased your patience. And patience, not vision, is the sniper's true weapon. The glare will fade eventually. Night will come, the aurora will return, and your sight will recover, if you last that long. For now you squint through pain and wait. Snow has taken warmth, comfort, and now vision, but it hasn't taken your will. And as long as you can still see enough to aim, enough to remain invisible, you endure. The cold doesn't relent, not after minutes, not after hours, not after days. You learn quickly that survival isn't about grand heroics. It's about a patchwork of small, ridiculous tricks strung together like stitches. Each one sounds laughable when told out loud, but in Karelia's winter, every scrap of wisdom is another chance to see morning. Your boots are the first battlefield. Frost creeps into them the way smoke creeps under a door, slow, invisible, inevitable. You wriggle your toes, feeling the scratch of hay packed inside your socks. It isn't comfortable. It itches, pricks, and sometimes shifts into lumps, but it's insulation, and insulation means life. Some men used moss instead, soft and absorbent. Others shredded potato peels and stuffed them into socks, swearing the starch kept frostbite at bay. It sounds like superstition, but then again, superstition is just survival wearing a disguise. Here's the mainstream fact. Frostbite casualties were staggering during the Winter War, sometimes rivaling combat losses. Medical reports show men arriving at aid stations with blackened toes, hands swollen like clubs, ears stiff. You shift your weight slightly, pressing against the stiff rags wrapped around your rifle, and consider the absurdity of it all. War in stories is about tanks and battles, grand maneuvers and generals. Out here it's about socks stuffed with moss, about whether you can chew rock-hard bread without breaking a tooth, about how to pee without raising steam. The small things decide whether you live to see the big things. Humor softens the edge, as always. You imagine publishing a guide after the war, the sniper's almanac of ridiculous survival tricks. Chapter 1, How to Make Fashionable Hay Socks. Chapter 2, Potato Peels, Not Just for Soup. Chapter 3, The Art of Not Freezing Your Rear End. You picture soldiers decades from now reading it like a comedy, never quite believing how serious it was. That thought almost makes you smile beneath your towel. The rituals extended beyond warmth too. Soldiers chewed spruce resin to stave off thirst, or to quiet a cough that might betray them. Some rubbed snow on cracked lips, believing it numbed the pain long enough to keep focus. One man swore that chewing pine needles gave him strength. Another carried a pouch of roasted rye, nibbling on it like candy. These weren't meals. They weren't even comfort. They were distractions, tiny gestures that gave the mind something to grasp while the body shivered. And when nothing else worked, men turned to imagination. They told each other stories of steaming saunas, of feasts waiting back home, of soft beds instead of pits in the snow. They joked about turning their frozen nests into winter saunas, absurdly pretending that their misery was a luxury. The laughter often ended in coughing, but for a moment it kept despair away. You press your cheek into the stock, eyes scanning the forest, and you realize how much these small details matter. They don't sound heroic. No one writes songs about socks filled with hay. But in a war fought on ice, it is the silly, the strange, the desperate that keep men breathing. Historians love to argue about weapons and strategies, about scopes versus iron sights, about kill counts and supply chains. But ask any man who lay in snow for days, and he'll tell you the truth. Survival was sewn together from odd scraps and half-jokes. You endured not by being fearless, but by being stubborn enough to stuff grass in your boots and laugh about it afterward. Your toes itch inside their hay prison, but they're not numb, and that's what matters. You breathe slowly into the towel, thinking of all the odd wisdom passed between comrades, as if each trick were a secret charm, none guaranteed survival. But together, they created a fragile shield against winter's indifference. The Soviets across the line endured the same. Their soldiers too packed boots with rags, cursed frozen bread, and joked about saunas. Snow is impartial. It swallows both sides. And perhaps that's the strangest truth of all. Enemy and ally alike fought not just each other, but the same endless cold. You settle deeper into your nest, body stiff, rifle steady. You think of the hay, the moss, the soot, the stockings, the hot stones, all the oddities that stitched life together. They may sound foolish, but they worked. And out here, foolishness and survival are sometimes the same thing. The forest is utterly still now, as if even the snow has grown tired of falling. You lie in your pit, body stiff, rifle silent, and realize how many small rituals and absurd tricks have carried you through this night. Animal fat, rags, towels, hay, frozen bread, whispered songs. They sound ridiculous when listed out, and yet together they form the fragile thread of your survival. Without them, you would have vanished into Karelia long ago. You breathe through the damp towel, slow and steady, and think of all the other figures out here. Men in white smocks melting into snowdrifts, unseen rivals across the tree line, comrades chewing rock-hard bread. You are alone, but not truly alone. Thousands of men on both sides endure the same cold, the same silence, the same fragile bargain with winter. The snow does not care who wins. It buries all the same. Here's a mainstream fact. By the end of the Winter War, Finland had lost tens of thousands of men, but the Soviets lost many times more. Despite overwhelming numbers, the Red Army was slowed and bloodied by the terrain, the weather, and the invisible figures who fired from snowbanks and disappeared. Snipers became symbols of Finland's defiance, a reminder that even in the bleakest cold, patience and cunning could turn weakness into strength. Quirky details color those memories. One veteran claimed he stuffed his boots with birch shavings when hay ran out. Another, that he survived a night by hugging his rifle like a pillow because he feared it would freeze if left alone. Some remembered how comrades joked about turning snow pits into winter saunas, a grim parody of Finland's beloved tradition. Even in hardship, humor bubbled like a secret fire, warming spirits when frost threatened to smother them. And historians still debate the lasting meaning of it all. Were the snipers truly decisive, or are their legends inflated by the drama of survival? Was Simo Heiha a ghostly figure of myth, or just one farmer who became very, very good at lying still? The questions will never be fully answered, because wars are not only fought in fields but in memories. Truth is as slippery as snow melting on skin. You close your eyes now, pressing deeper into your nest. The night grows softer, the ache in your limbs dulls, and even the sting in your eyes fades. The war is far from over, but for the moment you're alive. Invisible, absurd, numb, but alive. And maybe that's enough. The wind down comes slowly like snow settling after a storm. Your thoughts lengthen into gentler shapes, stretching out into something calmer. The rifle is heavy across your chest, but you imagine laying it aside, letting it rest while you rest. The forest around you hums with silence, no longer threatening but almost protective. You picture the aurora again, green and violet banners rippling in the black sky. Instead of searchlights, they feel like curtains closing on the day. The Soviets, the rifles, the hunger, all of it drifts into the background, swallowed by the immensity of winter. Breathe, you remind yourself. In and out. Slow, steady, unnoticed. The towel warms slightly against your lips. Your body softens, not fighting the snow but sinking into it, as though it were a bed. Your mind loosens its grip, trading vigilance for quiet. The duel, the discipline, the absurdity, all of it slides away. You let yourself imagine spring. The snow melting into rushing streams, the birch trees greening, the frozen earth giving way to fields again. The war may rage on, but spring will still come, and perhaps you will rise with it. For now, though, you rest. The snow covers you gently. The silence folds around you, and the night eases into calm. You've endured one more vigil, one more wait, one more absurd triumph of breath and patience. That is enough.